Since 2010, I've had a Secret Santa. Since 2010, nobody has ever come forward to tell me it's them. I should preface that this isn't an elaborate prank by some vengeful ex or an old friend. Not one of the gifts I've been sent has ever been of that nature. In all honesty, so many of them have just been odd. It started in December of 2010. I was a university student and grappling with the loss of my father. Not physically, mind you, but mentally. He had suffered a debilitating stroke at the tail end of that year, and his mind had never truly recovered. Early onset Alzheimer's disease, they had called it. He was only 58. But still, he persisted and made the best of the life that he had left, cracking jokes and showing an admittedly slightly diminished vigor he was always known for. I remember coming home from a visit to his hospital bed one night, saying goodnight to my mom and driving back to my dorm a couple hundred miles away. It was long, but I needed the time to process my own emotions and get a good night's sleep in my own space. When I got back to my front reception, the concierge told me a package had been left for me. This was especially odd, as I didn't have any expected packages, and none of my close friends were the type to just send gifts to me out of the blue. But I accepted it, and I took it back to my dorm, holding the black wrapped box carefully, a finger tucked under the delicate brown string. I set it down on my desk and I looked at the note attached. It was simple, but each word held such weight that I felt my throat dry before I'd even finished. Theo, yours is the road less traveled. Do not veer off of it. Your Secret Santa. Flipping over the card, I saw the small phrase, Dum Spiro Sparrow, with the .tor link attached to it. I quickly tried to check it out, but it presented me with a black screen and a passcode, and so I left it. They had known that I had been driving back here, but how? I had already gotten the news about my dad's stroke the day before, and I had been on campus ever since. Pressing on, I unwrapped the box and carefully lifted it up, revealing a most confusing sight that, at first, had my eyebrows raised, but would later have me terrified. Sitting on a satin pillow was a license plate covered in blood. My license plate. I immediately called the police, checked my car, and quizzed the concierge on who had left it. Naturally, no route led me anywhere. Since my car was fine, number plates attached, and the package was sent via courier, there was nothing to be done. I calmed myself down after a few hours and I set it aside, not wanting to get rid of it for fear of fraudsters, but terrified to keep it in sight. I moved the box with the rest of the things and I took the note to put on my desk. Maybe I would return to it one day when I felt up to it, but not now. The following year was far less kind. Dad suffered a burst in his aneurysm during open surgery to remove it, and was put into a medically induced coma. Christmas was spent at his bedside in the ICU, urging him to wake up, but yielding no response. There is something so otherworldly about being in a room of people that aren't alive or dead, that is indescribable to those who have never experienced it. But you feel very much like you're walking in a realm not of your own. I would sit by his bedside for so long, trying to coax him out of his coma with music, stories about politics, anything, but to no avail. On Christmas Day, exhausted and emotionally spent, I kissed him on the forehead and I wished him well, leaving to spend it with my mother, at least. As I was leaving, however, the head nurse stopped me and pointed to another black box. "Someone left you this. Said they knew they would find you here," she said, staring at it surprised. "We normally get gifts for our patients, but this is unusual." It only then came back to me the year before. I took it with shaking hands, and in my car, I began to inspect the next note. "Theo, some nights are more dangerous than others. Be clear of mind. Your secret Santa." This time, there is a pill bottle filled to the brim with raisins, and a small makeshift pump affixed to it like some macabre art piece. It felt sick. My head was spinning. Why would they do this? At the time when I was most vulnerable. I broke down in my car and screamed some songs on the way home to help shift the rising bile in my stomach, not wanting or capable of understanding such confusing actions at a time like this. And that was how it went, year on year until this year. Some years, it would be a simple but elusive message about taking heed of the next year, and others would be harder to ignore. In 2015, my mother passed from lung cancer, and I was sent a box containing a small cassette tape labeled "My First Mixtape for Mom," and a note reading, "Theo, there is as much joy to be found in memory as there is in sorrow. The key is balancing it. Your secret Santa." She died listening to my first mixtape. The tape went missing when I asked her to retrieve it from the hospice. I cried a lot that day with it on repeat, softly singing the same songs she would hum to me as I grew up. 2016, the year my daughter passed away, was especially hard. A pain like no other ripped through my soul and threatened to take everything with it, leaving nothing but a hollowed out shell of a man in its wake. Being straight edge with no alcohol, drugs, or cigarettes in the system left the emotions raw and untinged by coping mechanisms, something my grief was desperate to gorge itself on. It was early December, a month since we had lost her, and I was despondent, spending my time in my home and speaking to as few people as I could. Most knew to give me space, but that didn't stop the occasional well-wisher. A knock on the door. I ignored it. I wanted nothing to do with the living, hoping that they would simply go away and fade into obscurity, as I wished to do myself if time allowed for it. They knocked twice, and then a third time curtly, before I mustered the courage to get up and face the incessant stranger, only to be met once again with a black box and a note. My hands shook and my eyes watered as I turned the note over in my hands. "Theo, I know the shadow looms over you, but do not let it blot out the small light you now keep. Your secret Santa." Accompanying this note was a small toy car, crushed from the roof inwards, red paint dripping down the sides. I ran out of my apartment block, screaming to the high heavens for who they were and demanding they came out and faced me. But my pained yelling was met with abject silence. I was distraught. My pain brought to the surface in mounds of salt rubbed into the wounds for good measure. Instead of going back inside, I jumped into my car and I went round to the hospice where my father now resided. He was succumbing slowly but surely to the illness, and while it was forever painful to see him in that state, time spent with family around the holidays is always vital. He was asleep when I went in. his head dropped to the side in his armchair, while reading a favorite novel of his, snoring heavily as I forced a smile and I sat down. Comforted by the quiet of spending time with one person who would never ask me about the pain that I was holding on to, even if that was because he couldn't remember it happening. He began mumbling something under his breath, and I couldn't make it out. He had a habit of doing this when his energy was weak or if he couldn't quite get his words out, so I wasn't sure if it was his sleep talk or his inability to get up. I leaned in closer. "Is everything okay, Dad?" I asked, putting my ear closer to his mouth. Let it move," he grumbled between heavy breathing. "Let what move? Is your leg falling asleep?" "No, the shadow. Let it move." He was a bit clearer this time and slowly pulled a hand up towards the far corner of his room. My eyes followed the direction of his finger, and just for a moment, I saw a shape twist in the background before fading completely. Chalking it up to tiredness and grief, I sighed and I put him into bed before seeing myself out. It's amazing what a trip can do for your misery sometimes, because when I got home that evening, while I was still riddled with grief, I had largely pushed the Secret Santa incident to the back of my mind and resolved to work through what was going on, one step at a time. Sure enough, as time went on, I got better and I moved past it. 2017's Secret Santa gift was one of my own books and emblazoned with small feet on the cover, the letter reading, "Theo, grief takes small steps at a time, but you will eventually take strides. Your Secret Santa," along with the usual card. Another attempted crack in the Tor link was met with failure. Last year was a diorama of an empty house with a body laying in bed, as poorly crafted Christmas decorations hung around the place, the front door boarded up. "Theo, isolation can be the most insidious pain. Give thanks when it is broken. Your Secret Santa." In the spring, my ex-partner was found in her home. She had hung herself on Christmas Day and wasn't found for 3 months. She had shut the world out years ago, and the note she had left behind simply read, "I am going to be with my daughter. I'm sorry. I'm going home." I was pained by her loss, but as it had been so many years since we saw one another, I was thankful that she had at least found her peace in a way that I never could. Again, I would ponder the Secret Santa identity and try to crack the Tor login, but to no avail. This year, however, was different. It was last week and I had just begun packing for my trip overseas. A year away was something I knew I desperately needed, and it was a prime way of pushing the reset button on everything. I loaded up the car and was almost ready to pull away when a black truck pulled up outside of the property. It looked like a UPS van, but had no markings, logos, or indications of the company. A young man stepped out. He was clad in a UPS-style outfit, but black from head to toe, sporting a hoodie instead of a cap. "Package for Theodore Lee?" he asked, a low but friendly voice as I nodded and he handed me the box, before promptly returning on his heel and heading back to the van. "Aren't you gonna ask me to sign for it?" I called back, holding the box carefully as he turned and our eyes met. "Dumb Spiro, Sparrow, Mr. Lee." He smiled and he drove off, turning a corner and out of sight. Unsure what to expect, I went indoors and I set the larger box down on the counter, unwrapping the familiar black paper and gently taking apart the string, before looking at the note. Theo, these gifts have been many, but this will be the last. The pact is ending and it is time for the inheritance to pass. The choice is yours, as it's always been. Dumb Sparrow, your secret Santa. Inside was a sight that didn't just chill me to the bone, but left my eyes watering and my heart threatening to beat out of my chest. I called the hospice. No answer. I drove, breaking every speed limit imaginable to get there in time, rushing through the doors as a flabbergasted receptionist called the head nurse over. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know, and I collapsed to my knees, sobbing uncontrollably. My dad, the last member of my family, had passed in his sleep. In the box was a photo of him holding me as an infant, with the Tor link dutifully left above it once again, the word inheritance plastered across it. It took until tonight, but I mustered up the courage to finally look over the website. Entering the password sent me to a dark web market called Mott's Emporium, and offered various services like keeping tabs on someone, sending a death threat, or making someone disappear, and with various descriptions of the types of people that had been assigned to their employment, though it sounded suspiciously like slavery to me. As soon as I went to the testimonial section, however, a video popped up. It was my dad, much younger and sitting at my hospital bed as a teen. He was tired, his brown hair already fading to gray and his hands shaking as he spoke to the camera. Hey son, if you're seeing this then, you're much older and hopefully in a better place than you are right now. You probably had more than a few coincidences in your life, and things that, at the time, made you feel even worse than you can imagine. But this was by design. He paused, turning the camera to my bed, as an emaciated, comatose me breathed slowly, hooked up to a ventilation machine. You tried to take your own life, Theo. They say that you're going to be different when you wake up. The note that you left makes no sense and I don't know what to do. But somebody approached me with an offer, and I don't think I can refuse it. He leaned in, fear in his eyes but the desperation of a parent apparent throughout. Son, something came to me late at night and told me they would look out for you in exchange for, well, me. If I do this, they say they'll find a way to keep you safe and happy. The trade-off is, well... He paused, welling up as the realization overcame him. Well, I won't remember any of it, not once. But it's worth it, in order to see you grow into the man I know you can be, to give you the chance you deserve to beat this. Our family has a saying, Theo. While I breathe, I hope. Or to put it in the native tongue. Fresh tears rolled down my face as a shadow formed from the corner of the room, and the two spoke in unison. Dumb Sparrow.